The name of the podcast is Dream Plan Execute, where I highlight individuals who dream frictionless, plan thoroughly, execute relentlessly, and Stephen Curry, you're definitely one of those persons.
My path has had some interesting twists and turns. And when I was really little, my mom taught me to code. And I love the thing about you sort of had an idea for something, you kind of laid out what the architecture would need to be. This is how the display is done. This is how the input will be done. And then you coded it and it was there, right? Most of my friends were film students. So I had this exposure to like film and it seemed interesting and fun for them. The director and producer of Independence Day and I set up a company together to do computer graphics. We got a great offer from this German company called Das Werk. So they bought us out. I didn't want to wake up at 30, 40, 50 years old making the effects for someone else's movie. And then I thought I wanted to basically try to make a movie. So there I am, like having this sort of crisis. This is not Ikigai. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get out of film. I'm going to get into technology. I know how to build stuff. You know, I've been an engineer. The pandemic forced us to be remote for a while. How do we make that beautiful? At 3 o'clock, I can be playing with my kids. Or at 6 o'clock, I can be like, where the hell did the day go? That's what I pay you for. I pay you for that 3 p.m. when I'm like, I've got 2 kids who are young and I want to be in their life. This is exactly what I needed to hear. We're going to call the company the Sukha Company, the Happiness Company. I realized that we had a lot of members and they were all disconnected. But I would talk to a lot of them because remember, I'm trying to listen. She said, I can go buy a pair of running shoes and Nike will sell me a left and right and here a pair of shoes. I can put them on my feet. I can go run. But 100 million people belong to the Nike Run Club. Every one of their shoes can be used to run alone. So the reason is community. You run faster. You're more accountable. You run further. I think what's amazing right now is learn. There is so much information. You can learn almost anything. Just learn. It's scary. AI and the robots are going to take over the world. We'll become, their slaves. Again, I know all the things, right? But learn.
Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast. The name of the podcast is Dream Plan Execute, where I highlight individuals who dream frictionless, plan thoroughly, execute relentlessly. And Stephen Puri, you're definitely one of those persons.
Trying
Working
to.
at, no, you're doing it. Working at Fox, working at DreamWork, starting your own company. And then not only just starting your own company, but what you're focused on, which is building a product that help people to focus,
Yep.
especially working from home.
That is
I
true.
want to just dive into what makes Stephen tick and why you became the person you became. So let's start from the beginning, right?
Okay.
Let's dive into a young Stephen Puri. Were you always creatively curious? What was your passions when you were in primary school and work your way through college?
Okay. So as you alluded to, my path has had some interesting twists and turns. And we were talking about one of your previous guests who talked about life sometimes like things fall in your lap and then you figure out what to make of them. So I have a couple of those, just forewarning. Here's going to be an interesting twist and turn. So when I was born, my parents had met because they both were engineers at IBM.
Oh, wow.
So my mom was a software engineer, a coder, and my dad was a hardware engineer, an electrical engineer who designed essentially CPUs, like logic chips, right? Not
Okay.
memory, but like logic. So they met, got married, had me, and when I was really little, my mom taught me to code, and it was very natural. I loved the thing about you sort of had an idea for something, you kind of laid out what the architecture would need to be. This is how the display is done. This is how the input will be done. This is what we
Right.
process. And then you coded it and it was there, right? Sort of dream plan execute in a certain way, right? But you
Right.
had a lot of control over it. So I did that. And I was in DC, sort of went through and you enjoyed high school, definitely tried to move through as quickly as I could. So I got a scholarship to go to USC in LA, which school did not know very well. But they had grand plans for me and they were very gracious. And I was a IBM's Watson scholar. So they paid a part of my tuition and they said, you have a job anytime you want. If you want to make money during school, you can work at IBM. So I'm sort of working as a coder part-time at IBM while I'm going to school.
Right.
Here's the first lucky thing that just drops in my lap where I was like, what do you do? So USC, University of Southern California, has probably the best cinema school, one of the top 3, maybe the best cinema school in the country, right?
Yeah.
So a bunch of my friends, just by virtue of being in the dorm and you hang out with your buddies on your floor and stuff, a bunch of my friends were film students. So I had this exposure to film and it seemed interesting and fun for them.
Right.
Didn't know that was my path. And I was there in LA right when film became digital.
Mm.
And I happened to be super lucky because I was getting out of school and I was sitting at the nexus of I could talk to an engineer and reliably communicate something in engineering speak because both my parents are engineers. I was a software engineer, right? So like,
Right.
but I also could turn around and talk to any of my friends who were filmmakers. You know, they want to be directors and actors and producers and understand how they would talk creatively about the thing. Like, here's the emotion of the scene that needs to happen this way, but I'm only going to be able to shoot this portion of it. How do we create the world around it in the computer? And that
Right.
suddenly went from being how do we create that using optical techniques to let's use computers. And I spoke both. So
Mm.
I fell ass backwards into, oh, do you want to help produce this?
Right.
And I started having a little career in my early 20s of producing computer generated effects for movies. Who did that for movie trailers, for films. We won the Academy Award for the visual effects in Independence Day, which does great things for your career when you're on the team that wins the Academy Award, right? So the
Yeah.
director and producer of Independence Day and I set up a company together to do computer graphics, totally get everyone we liked working with over the years, put them in one company. I ran the
Right.
company and we raised about $15 million, which is not that hard when you just win an Academy Award. People are like, oh, you know what you're doing, right? And I was like
Right.
25 at the time. I was like 24, 25. I was like, sure, we know what we're doing. Because, you know, when you're young, you have a lot of confidence. You're like,
Yeah.
you don't know
Right.
what you don't know, right? I'm like, we can totally do this, right?
Right.
So, oh, you want to ask a question? Sorry.
No, 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 no. Please
Oh,
continue.
so anyway, so that was like the first twist is I went from thinking I would be doing one thing into, oh my God, this is an amazing opportunity presented. And it's going really well. I did like 14 movies in the course of just a couple of years. And then we ended up selling that company. We got a great offer from this German company called Das Werk, which is sort of like
Okay.
Liberty Media of Germany, if you know it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they bought us out. They wanted to get into the digital game, blah, blah. So I was like 27, 28. I was like, oh my God, I've had my first exit, although I wouldn't even have called it an exit then. I wasn't
Exit
that
at the time.
sophisticated. It
You wouldn't
was just
even
like, I
have the
sold my
language.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
had some money. So I took 2 years off. I just sort of like traveled and tried to figure out, you know, what was interesting in the world because I didn't want to wake up and be like 30, 40, 50 years old making the effects for someone else's movie. It was like,
Mhm.
I've done a bunch of movies. I know how to do it, but is this my calling? I don't know. But I was sure lucky that I got to do it, you know,
Right.
for a couple of years in my 20s. And then I thought I wanted to basically try to make a movie. And a lot of my skills, keep in mind, were what are called below the line, which means like in the budget for a movie, you
Yeah.
have a big distinction above the line, which are the creative professions, the
Mhm.
director,
Right.
the actors, the major actors, right? The producer, like these are above the line. And then you have what's called below the line, which is kind of a classification system. Below the line means like the grips and the costume designer and the
Right.
cinematographer and the production designer, stuff like that, right? So I was always a below the line guy. And I'd worked with great directors. I worked with Cameron, Fincher, Spielberg, Woody Allen, Jim Jarmusch, like all these guys. It was great. But it was also, I was a technician that was hired for a bunch of money on the movie. And I was like,
Right.
what if I go produce movies? I ended up trying to do that. Ended up, as you know, executive vice president at DreamWorks. I was vice president at Fox. I got to run some of the franchises that I grew up on. Like I grew up watching Die
That
Hard.
is
I was the
crazy.
executive on Die Hard 5. And I was like, how crazy is this? Me, of
That
all
is
people, is like
crazy.
working with Bruce and stuff on Die Hard 5. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
So did that for a couple of years. Definitely had a moment around, it was around Die Hard 5, Wolverine 2, the Wolverine,
The
where I was
Wolverine.
like, I think I'm going to wake up and be like 40 or 50 years old and be like, okay, kids, daddy's got to go make Die Hard 11 because we've
Right.
got to pay for your college, you know, or whatever. Like I was like, hmm, I'm not sure if I'm making a difference in the world.
Mm.
And I had a real crisis in my 30s of, hmm, am I going to find the thing that I was meant to do? Because I kind of fell into visual effects.
Hmm.
And then I through again just lucky breaks, just having friends, you know, they were like, "Oh,
Well,
come make movies. Let's make an indie film." That turned into let's go work at a studio. Turned into become a vice president of a studio. You know, I was like, I've
yeah.
been super lucky. I've worked very hard, but again, a lot of it's luck. Let's not kid ourselves. And I was like, so I'm grateful for everything that's happened, but what am I going to do that actually gives back? Like when my kids are old enough to say, like, "Daddy, what do you do?" What am I going to tell them? Where they're like, "Oh man, I'm so proud of you," as opposed to, cool. So you're the guy in Ant-Man 7. My dad made Ant-Man 7, you know,
Right.
right? Does anyone ride their tricycle, their big wheel in the street and be like, go dad, make Ant-Man 9? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah,
So
maybe. I mean, it's a cool experience, but I think what you urged for was your soul urge, which is finding your ikigai, right?
exactly. Yeah. Which
Yeah,
actually Laura and I joke about. My wife, I call her Pumpkin, and
yeah.
she's very focused on that. I call it Pumpkin Guy. I'm like, how's your pumpkin
That's
guy?
good.
She's like, I'm on it.
Yeah, no, and I think everyone gets to that cross section in their career. Like, for instance, I find there's a lot of parallels between film production and construction management, right? Like you said,
Really?
yeah, 100%. For instance, we call our main director of projects project director, and he
Yep.
is doing exactly what a director would do, which is
On set.
orchestrate all the different trades,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so Bruce Lee has this saying that you weren't learn one way, you learn all ways. And so like just the terminology above line and below the line sits well with me because we do have a
You get
below
that.
line items, which is administrative. It's the things
That's
that go on in
exactly.
the background. And then
That's
the
exactly it.
above the line cost is the hard cost, which is for you it would be an actor. For me it's an electrician, it's a carpenter, right?
Yeah.
It's those trades that are front and center that you see, right?
You totally get it.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just so interesting like how similar and different certain industries are, right? And
Yes.
you, like you said, you get to a point in your career, right? You know, you're looking back, you're being introspective, and I think people feel this along the way, right? And just for context, ikigai means that you're centered in your life's purpose, right? So
Yes.
it's what you're good at, what the world needs, what you love doing, and what people will pay you for, right?
Yes.
And if it doesn't have all four, it's not ikigai, right? And so a lot of people can get into a profession, it has three. You're getting paid well, people need it, and you're
Yeah.
good at it, but do you really love it? Do you
Yeah.
really like get up excited to do it?
I've seen that Venn diagram, that famous Venn diagram of
Venn
Ikigai
diagram,
sits
right?
here. Yeah.
And so I learned about Ikigai later on in my life just
Mhm.
by accident. You know, you scroll and I see this Venn diagram, and I was like, I'll never forget this.
Yeah.
And I'll forever always preach it to anyone who ever asks, like, how did you find out that construction management was going to be
Yeah.
the thing? I didn't find it, it found me, just like how film production found you. I started off wanting to be an architect, you know, like, and
Yeah.
even before I wanted to be an architect, I wanted to be a game designer, but I just knew
Oh,
I couldn't tell my parents at the time, 15 years ago, like, yeah, I know you sent me to school. I'm going to a really good school. I want to do game design. And in Jamaica, specifically, in ninth grade, you have to pick your subjects. And the
really?
subjects that you pick is going to really cast a very narrow focus on what you're going to do with your career. So
Wow.
you
That
want to
early,
become
you
a,
sort of have to declare.
yes.
Wow.
Because by the time you get to like 12 or 13 grade and you say you want to go back, no, and say you're on the line to be a doctor, right?
Right.
It's a different subject matter than being in accounting. You say you want to do
Yes.
accounting, it's going to be expensive to do that transfer in college. So you're going to have to take remedial classes from ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade to get into the accounting track. So you kind of need to have a good
Wow.
understanding of what you're
Huh.
going to do. And for me, I was like, it's not going to be a doctor. It's not going to be a lawyer. So what is that I like doing? I like video games and I like animation. I wanted to
Hmm.
be an animator. And it's like, there's no way my parents would even go for this. Like, it's not even going to be a question. So I have this curiosity or this itch to design. I was like, well, architecture is like a happy medium we could shake on. Like, I could still do design. I
Yes.
still get to animate, but it's still a profession in
It's
a
a
way
real
that
business. Yeah.
it's a real business. You
I,
can start. So like I was like, I'm gonna do architecture, and everyone agreed this was going to be okay, right? And so I did construction tech, technical drawing, principles of business, because at one point I recognized, well, if everyone going to my school is going to become doctors and super
Mhm.
famous, what do you do when you get super famous? You want a nice car and you want a nice house. I'm going
Yep.
to be the guy who's going to be around all the successful people who need a nice house, who knows how to design houses. So they're
Yeah.
all going to be my client and they're going to know me for years.
So smart. I love that planning. And by the way, you, I have a story for you in a moment. Let me
Yeah.
finish the answer to your question, but I have a good
Yeah,
story
so
for
at
you.
that point, it's like it just kind of it weaved itself. Like now I'm in construction management, but I got to
Yeah.
engineering before I got to construction management because of just the thought parts that my dad had. Is like, listen, architecture is good, but
Mhm.
leaving school, it's real tough. There's not a lot of money in it like engineering. So why don't you do engineering and go back and do architecture?
Okay, you're gonna love this. So
Yeah,
there I am, like having this crisis, as you said, this
right,
existential crisis of this is not ikigai, even though I
right.
wouldn't have called it ikigai at the time. Now I understand that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to get out of film. I'm going to get
Hmm.
into technology. I know how to build stuff. You know, I've been an engineer. I know that there is a closer relationship between what I want to build and being able to build it, as opposed to a film where it's like, I have an idea for a movie. I need thousands of people to try to make this movie, right? Millions of
Movie,
dollars,
right.
right? So I went back and started a startup. And can I tell you, my dad,
Hmm.
Indian immigrant, electrical engineer. He was so happy because he's like, finally, I understand what you're doing. He's like, the entire film career, I could not understand. Because, like you were saying, it doesn't feel like a business to go be a game animator, right?
Right, yeah.
You're an architect, you're a construction manager. Like, that feels like a business.
Tangible,
So
yeah, yeah.
my dad was so happy. He's like, oh, I can tell my friends what you do now because I understand. I was like, okay, what is that? So, did two startups, raised about 6 million for those two, and both failed. And it was
Okay.
just a really great lesson of, oh, this is way harder than I thought it would be. Because I thought, I did that other company, we sold it, that went so well, right?
Right.
And I think I had gotten too confident, too full of myself, arrogant,
Mhm.
if you will, where I should have listened more closely, like to our early, users of our platforms to be like, what is it? How are we really solving this for you?
Right.
And I wasn't. And that was
What was the product that you were designing? What was the use case for it?
oh, one was basically Instagram had just come out, and it was very
Okay.
much, it felt like a kind of selfish flow to me. It was all about selfies, right? It was about yourself. Like, let me send this selfie out to everybody, right?
Right, right.
And what we designed was, well, what if that selfie actually started a conversation where you could touch it and say, oh, Ramon, you were at the, so and so concert last night. I was there too. And you would
Right,
share photos back and forth and becomes like a quick collaborative album, right? So
right.
what we're saying is that Instagram is about me. What if there's something about we? And
Mm,
ultimately, I'll tell you, Snapchat executed better on that. When they launched stories, they had a better, bigger user base that they could push it out to, and they did a better user experience. It was much more lightweight, much more frictionless, and that took off. We had gotten to like 60,000, daily active users.
right.
We never got to millions, right? So that was a tough one where I thought, oh, there's room in the marketplace for this. But later I realized how much Snapchat and Instagram, some of these platforms really paid influencers to get people to adopt their product quietly in the early days.
Right,
And
yeah.
I was not paying people off. I was thinking, well, if we make a cool product, people will adopt it. Okay.
Hmm.
Somewhat naive,
Yeah.
but bottom line is they had two failures. And I was like, wow, this is really hard. And with both of those, I did one thing I think was smart. When there was the moment of like, okay, I think we need to wrap this up. Like, this is not going to go further. I shouldn't raise more money because I don't know how we're going to win. I can raise money if I'm like, this is how we're going to use it. We could win. But I reached
Right.
that point of like, I think we need to wrap this up. I sat in a chair with a pad of paper, not my phone, not my laptop, not my iPad, a pad of paper, old school, because I want to feel it, and a pencil. And I said to myself, write down what you learned before you forget. And I wrote out to myself, like very clinically, here is stuff I did wrong. If I did this, if I went back 2 years in time, I would do these things differently. And that's really served me because you do repeat your mistakes until you sort of really own, like, I mean, like if you're a great soccer player, I'm not a big sports
Yeah.
fan, but like, or a basketball player or something, unless you watch the tape and you're
Hmm.
like, you know what? From the left side of the court, I always throw air balls because I'm,
Yep.
unless you do that, you're going to keep throwing air balls.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was really painful. But man, when I did that, I looked at that and I went, okay, I've captured like a couple $1 million of knowledge, a couple years of my life. These are the things I learned. I'm going to tell you this, what I'm doing now, I never would have told you during either of those two companies, this is where this was leading.
Right.
No idea. But the thing that came up was both those companies, I loved the freedom of how work was evolving, where it was becoming more remote. Like I didn't have headquarters, offices
Right.
for either company. So yeah, all the things people talk about now with remote work or hybrid work, You can hire globally. That girl you hire, the amazing designer, she doesn't have
Yeah,
to live 30 minutes from your office. She could live in
doesn't.
Montreal and all good. You got the best talent you could because you have a global talent pool.
Right.
No one wastes time and gets frustrated commuting. Like, I mean, you save money on office. Like,
Yeah,
there's
a
so many
whole
things about
bunch
that.
of
I was like,
things. Yeah.
but I learned, oh my God, there are some real challenges in remote work. And now you know where we are in the world is like there is the tug of war between like in New York, Jamie Dimon and Chase.
Yes.
Everyone's back in the office. You're fired.
Yes. Yes.
And oh no, remote works in some place, and there's hybrid. And there's
And
this
it's
tug of war
hybrid.
going on. And the way I see it is, it doesn't need to be a tug of war. It is rather maybe because the pandemic forced us to be remote for a while.
Yeah, it was a social experiment
Yeah,
of
that people
sorts.
learned.
Yeah.
It's almost like having like another color on your palette. Like, oh, we learned about blue. So
Hmm.
going forward, not everything needs to be blue. But 6 years ago, a lot of companies couldn't paint skies or couldn't paint lakes. And
Right.
now as you're painting, you're like, I have yellow and orange. Oh, I have blue too.
Yeah.
So that's really what inspired me. I was like, you know what? There are some things that I learned in doing these remote companies
Hmm.
that maybe came from film and overlaid really well on here because I mean, you know a bit about film. The funny thing about film is for decades, movies start remote. They're writers writing at home, writing coffee shops.
100%.
You have a lunch with the producers, you pitch your ideas in a restaurant, and you go back to your home and work. And then when one of your ideas starts to catch, you get a little funding and the producer sets off a production office. And like
Yep.
1 or 2 days a week, you're hybrid where it's like, let's all come in on Mondays and we'll meet with the production designer and the location scout, right? And the other
Right.
days you're home writing. And then you're on set, $125,000 a day. It is, RTO. It is
Yep.
like you are here all day long
Yep.
doing
Yep.
principal
Yep.
photography for like 3, 4, 5 months, right? And then it goes back to hybrid with like
The
editors and
closeout, the
sound
editing,
editors,
the yep.
right? And then it
So,
goes back to remote. And that
yep.
entire, no one talks about it in film about like, oh, we're such a remote hybrid, like RTO.
Naturally, right. Yeah.
But as a leader, you naturally learn if you're a producer how
Hmm.
to lead in each of those stages,
Stages
the
of,
remote
yep.
stage, the hybrid stage. And it's been that way for decades. It's always been that
Always,
way.
always been that way.
So that was really fun to look at that and go, you know what? There are a bunch of books by the smart people. Let's be honest. When you read, Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, you read Clear, you read Deep Work by Cal Newport. You read this, like a lot of people have written fantastic things. There's no need to go like, we're the first people that thought about how do you
You
make
ever think of this? Yeah.
right. So you read a bunch of those. I've read a bunch of those. I actually met Cal Newport, which is kind of cool. And I basically said, how could I address the problems that I've experienced, that I've seen my teams experience, and can I contribute something to the world that I'd be proud of? Like, here are tools that directly speak to the problems you may have if you're working remote or hybrid. And that is how I end up doing what I'm doing today, which I'm now super proud of. And my wife is pregnant, so we're gonna have a child, and I'll be able to tell the child this is what I do with my life.
And this is what you do. So, one couple of things I want to get back to because you said you wrote down what the problem was, right?
Yep.
I am curious. What was the problem that you identified
I'll
when
tell
you
you,
wrote
number
it?
one was listen more than talk.
Mm.
And part of being
Mm.
in film is you have to be a great talker. You have to tell stories. You have to be able to pitch. Da, da, da. So it definitely rewards talking.
Okay.
And when I went into tech, which is trying to build things that solve people's problems, I didn't make the transition into listening is more powerful than talking.
Who would you have wanted to listen more to? Was it the users or your
Yep.
engineers? The users.
Well, I mean, yes, of course, engineers and designers, yes. But the number one thing was spend a lot of time with other people. If you go, I have a problem, I'm thirsty, right?
Right.
Don't
Okay.
just go, well, let's go make aluminum cans and we'll fill it with water and it'll taste like grapefruit or whatever. Like,
Right.
go talk to 100 people that are buying water at the store and being like, hey man, why you buy water? Oh, cool. Okay. Anything suck about that experience? Like, is the experience great already? In which case you're cool, or is there something you
Yeah.
wish were better? Man, I should have done more of that. And I didn't. And that was me. That was arrogance.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because a couple of things you said really highlight out to me. One, and I think a lot of persons who are successful do struggle with it too. Is like there's conquering and then there's governing, right? So like
Yeah.
Alexander the Great, the only person who really got it well was Napoleon, and he still struggled with it. But like Alexander, like you've conquered this piece of land. You've, went over the hill, but
Right.
then once you have it under your control,
Then what?
governing it and managing it, and like
Yeah.
outing all the fires that come from governing, and the
Yeah.
politics kind of starts creeping in, and founding members always have a hard time dealing with that transition from like before it was bootstraps, not a lot of regulation, not a lot of compliance, not a lot of risk, and your way of building and winning the product and creating
Yeah.
is now at risk when it becomes a huge conglomerate company, right? Because it's like you can't go about just, but you do kind of still need to keep innovating, right? And
Yeah.
finding that balance is always hard. It's like the
Yep.
most difficult thing a founding person, a founding member of a company has to transition into now governing a company of 600 people, 700 people versus when it was 10 people.
And Ramon, let us not kid ourselves.
Yeah,
I am trying to learn. I'm doing my best to, work on the things I think I need to do better.
yeah.
I get up every day, and it was something I learned at DreamWorks, by the way. This is a
Mm,
great lesson at DreamWorks. There are some film studios where there's a lot of impetus on go home tonight, and let me say this: the way the studios are set up is you usually have 5 to 7 senior executives, vice presidents,
gotcha.
senior vice presidents, and the film studio's slate of films is divided among them. So if there are 300 films in some state of development, oh, it's a
Right,
book we optioned, oh, it's a video game we bought the rights to, oh, it's a script we bought, oh, it's Brad Pitt's favorite, movie he wants to remake, whatever. So 300 of those, they're divided up. Let's say there's 6 people. It means you generally have about 50 films as a senior executive that you're responsible for. Now, only 1 or 2 are going to get made each year, but you're nurturing all of them, hopefully, to be their best selves and see what gets made.
right,
So one of the things I noticed was there's some studios where there was an impetus to the senior executives to say, hey, man, go home and figure out how you can make this at a lower budget. Like, how can you be thrifty and can you make this 1% cheaper, right? Which is an
right,
important thing. Like the joke goes, it's not called show friendship. It's called show business. Like it is a
right.
business with a
It is a
P&L, right?
business. Yep.
But I'll tell you this. One of the things I loved about being in DreamWorks is probably my favorite job in film. The impetus was more, can you go home and make it 1% better? And that was really inspiring. And like the writers that I worked with at DreamWorks were I got to work with the best writers in the action genre because I did action movies, the
Right.
best writers working in Hollywood in that genre because there was that sense of I'm going to come there and be nurtured to do my best, not be continually hounded with, do we need the third tank? Because if we only rent 2 tanks, it's going to be cheaper. Like, does the scene really need to have 3 wizards who cast spells? Can you have 2 wizards who can? Like that conversation, which is
Right.
valid.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
not so much a conversation with DreamWorks. It was more like, tell me how this scene could be better. And that was really cool. And there were a lot of lessons like that that carried over when I wanted to start my new company. I was like, how did I
Right.
learn from that? And how did I learn from my failure? The two, startups that didn't work. Like that sheet of paper.
Yeah. Well,
I will not show it to you, but I'll tell you it's important.
reading tape is not just specific to you. Like part of the podcast, what I like or what I wrote into it is having an athletic mindset, right?
Mhm.
And so, like athletes, they miss a lot of goals before they score goals. Before
Right.
you see that highlight reel of him going around defenders, dancing, shaking and baking and kicking the ball into the goal,
Yes.
before you see those moments, it's a lot of moments where they miss the shot and they really wanted to win in high school or in primary school. They had a rival who was really nasty about the rivalry, and you really wanted to beat the person, you just couldn't, right? And that
Yep.
digs at you so bad that when the next time that opportunity comes, you're like, I'm going to ensure a win. If it means not being selfish with the ball and passing the ball off to a teammate that's open versus like I have to be the one who wins, those are the lessons you learn in those failures. And business is very similar. I found in project management that the best project managers came from a sports background.
I think that's a fantastic observation. And you're right. I remember that great Michael Jordan quote where he talks
Yeah.
about his stats of how many like game winners he
Yes.
lost, he missed, how
Yeah.
many shots, like free throws,
Yeah.
he missed, stuff like that. And it's true, but it's the tenacity. And this is one
Yeah.
thing that I saw in film. I will tell you this. I've been out of film for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
The people I bump into that are still working in film, that are still writing, still directing,
Hmm.
the common characteristic is not that they were the most talented people. If you had asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, oh my God, is Ramon the best director? Oh, he's amazing. He's, the whole thing
Right.
is, that is not the common characteristic. The ones that I meet that are still working, it's that they were the most tenacious.
Grit. They have
And that
grit.
is the thing of just like, I'm no, you can tell me no.
Hmm.
I will go work on it tonight. I'll come back tomorrow. I'm going to keep doing this until it becomes so good. You can't say no to this script, to this actor, to whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah, no, I love what you said about DreamWorks, which is let's try and make it 1% better each day, right?
Yeah.
No, just math wise, right? 1.01 raised to 365 gives you
Compounding is powerful,
37x.
right?
So if you can go 1% better each time, just naturally, whatever you're doing, like it
Yeah.
doesn't have, it could be writing a script, it could be playing a sport, it could be project management, it could be development, whatever you're doing, that compounding interest calculation works in finance, it works in business, it
Oh
works
yeah.
everywhere. On the other side, if you are not doing what you're supposed to do 1% each day, you also compound negatively also, right? It's neutral to what you're not doing and doing, right? And
Yes.
so culturally for them to have that is amazing. And I'll give you some context to like in construction, parallel that's with construction, right?
Hmm.
I have seen like when you're talking about hybrid work versus
Yep.
non-hybrid work, construction had this for years. Like before you get on site, we call it on site. You also call it on site too in making a film, right? It's pre-construction, which we have pre
Hmm.
and post production. We have
Yep.
pre-construction. It's estimating, taking the drawings and estimating the drawings. Even before that, before you get drawings, it's an idea in some owner's head that you got to pull out of the owner. What is it that you're looking for?
Yeah.
Again, construction is a business. No one's building the building for free. Like the intent is to make money on the job, right? And so to make sure that you make money on the job, you have a team of estimators who estimate the job on paper. How
Yeah.
much manpower is it going to take? How long do we think this production cycle or this development cycle is going to be, right? Like
Right.
how long from boots to ground to offsite is going to take? Like how much risk are we carrying as it pertains to person's salary, right?
Yep.
And then insurance, all the pre-construction items get built in on an Excel sheet. All that can be done hybrid.
Hmm.
All that can be done remote, really, honestly. Like you
Yeah.
don't really need to meet in person to do that,
Correct.
right? But then the tangible building the building, you have to be on site, right? And so
Yes.
that's where being in person, being on site really needs to happen, right? And then after the build out is closed out, there's closing out insurance, closing out trades, closing out punch list items. There's a lot of like wrapping the job up that can be done hybrid. So, or I would say fully remote at that point, right?
Yes.
And so COVID became a really interesting experiment for construction because a lot of the time it was like, no, everyone has to be on site. Accountant, insurance guy,
Right. It's like, why?
who the accountant doesn't even walk the site. Like their job is to get the requisitions done, right? The billings done. And
Yeah.
so COVID just forced upon everyone, thrust upon everyone this opportunity to like, okay, we have to learn how to remote work.
Yep.
And no, like anything else in life, when a great event happened, you can't go back to you can't close Pandora's box. Pandora's box is already
It's
open.
open. Yeah.
All right. You can't tell somebody who's an accountant that they need to be back on site to do their job well when they were doing their job well remote,
Hmm. Yep.
right? It could be like I would know the opportunity for hybrid is coming in. A lot of companies, and I'm surprised in construction is like, okay, we recognize let's try and do 3-2 or 4-1 where one day you're home, the other 4 days we want you on site so
Right.
that there's nice to come into the office and like clean yourself up. You meet you talk about the sports game the night before, right? You chit chat a little bit. It takes you out of the home. People at your home sometimes don't even recognize that you're working, like and like
Yes.
because you're home, the assumption is that you are going to be able to do something else except work, right? And so
Right.
there's also those boundaries you have to not have to deal with when you go on site. So I think a hybrid experience is great, but
Mhm.
not everybody needs a hybrid experience. People legitimately, their scope of work does not require them to be on
Yeah.
at the
It,
office, you know?
it's true. I'll tell you one of the things that hit for me because when I was starting, this company,
Yeah.
it was definitely a moment of, okay, like what have I learned? What am I going to do? And this really stood out. And a friend of mine I was talking to was like, I really feel like there's this movement in the world. I was like, okay, let's try this. And it's curious what you said about, accountant. Do they really need to be there writing requisitions on the construction site? No, no, they don't, right?
No.
So here's the funny thing is, having spent now a lot of time around, this idea and developing a tool for it,
Hmm.
is I've been very conscious of what are those things that in this RTO, remote, hybrid, tug of war, really do benefit from being in person. And you talked about, around the water cooler, having the talk about the sports game last night as weekend.
Right.
There's something that just makes you feel warm about other people when you actually are in real life with them, right? So that's
Hmm.
not even work other than it is making the relationship warm between the people you work with, right? So
Correct.
there's that.
Yes.
There's also this, I'll tell you, creatively, I've never been on a Zoom or Meet or a Teams or anything like that,
Right.
that gives you the same creative vibe as being in the room with someone. Like, for example, in film, when you're breaking story, when you're coming up with a story,
Yeah.
there's absolutely something about just being around a table, being by a whiteboard, being in a
Yep.
restaurant, and having that. I don't know what should happen next. Well, I think Ramon has got to do this because the dragon is, get
Right.
that
Right.
thing. It's just never quite the same on a Zoom, and I don't know what that is. People have written smart stuff about it. I can't say any one of them nails it,
Hmm.
but there is something there about that in the room vibe, and to be able to accommodate that and be able to go between the two worlds. Because I mean, and I appreciate, you've looked at what I do. What I really focused on building was saying, hey, the times you're doing the kind of work where you're at home and
Yes.
you can be at home and focus, how do we make that beautiful? Like, the name of my company, I don't think I've ever told you this. Um, the name of my company came from this. We had an early version
Yes.
with a bunch of members, and Laura and I got married. And we go off, we're very lucky, we went to Bali for like 10 days. And it was one of the rare times when you're running a small business and people talk to you like 7,000 times a day with every decision of like, do I buy
Right.
a stapler? Should we do this thing? This client was, for those 10 days, everyone knew, just stay away. Just don't bug Steven. He's like on his
Yeah.
honeymoon,
Come
like,
on,
do
man.
not bug Steven, right?
Steven. Yeah.
So I
This
was
is
talking to
not the
Laura and I was
time.
like, I need to come up with a name for this company. And this is kind of this is a unique time in my life in that right now, no one is getting, my energy. No one's asking me questions to do anything. Would it be cool if I sort of brainstorm on this, like meditate, just let things in my unconscious sort of da, da, da. And I'd love to talk to a couple of our power members that I see using it every day
Hmm.
and ask them, what do you love about what we do? Like, what's cool about this? Because I think that might feed my unconscious. And then maybe over the next 10 days, I come up with something, right?
Right.
And Laura and I met in yoga. And we have a lot of like sort of yogic kind of energy feeling of like energetically you create the world around you, like you and I have talked about, right?
Yes.
So Laura, who's super cool, was like, sure, yeah, do a couple Zooms today, tomorrow, whatever it is. So I did. And I'm telling you, there was one member this guy spoke to was the most valuable conversation I had about what it is we do. So I asked him, let's be honest, like 8-10 minutes of dumb questions. Ramon, like, what's your favorite feature? Like, what do you like about
Right.
this? So he asks these things and he kind of answers my questions. And none of them actually spark that thing where it's like, for example, we have over 1,000 hours of music, all scientifically composed, like 60 to 90 beats per minute. These key signatures that help you more. Some of it's binaural if you want like a 40 hertz difference between your, like all sorts of stuff. We've
Right.
got timers, we've got smart assistants that help you do your work. So it's a good thing. And he did. So at the end of the call, I was kind of like, hey man, I only asked for 10 minutes. I really appreciate, I want to respect your time. Thanks for doing this. And he said, Steven, I don't think you asked me the right question.
Mm.
Okay. So what's the right question
What
here?
is the right question?
And he
Yeah.
said, you should ask me, why do I pay you? Okay, Nick,
Yeah.
why
Why
do
do
you pay
you?
me?
Yeah.
And he said, at 3 o'clock, I can be playing with my kids. Or at 6 o'clock, I can be like, where the hell did the day go?
Mm.
And he said, the difference is, did I open the Sukha in the morning?
Because you get back that time
Exactly.
because
He's
you're
like,
so focused.
that's what I pay you for. I pay you for that 3 p.m. when I'm like, I've got 2 kids who are young and I want to be in their life. And I was like, thank you so much. This is exactly what I needed to hear. So I'm at dinner with Laura that night. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, one of the guys I spoke to, this great thing. Let me tell
Yep.
you this. He said this thing at 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. And I was all
Yeah.
excited, right? So we're going to bed that night. We brushed our little teeth and we were chatting. And Laura looked at me. She goes, you know what it is? The reason you're having a hard time coming up with a name
Yeah.
is because you've been really focused on what it is you do. And you're like, we can't be, focus app 14 or,
Right.
mental, focus 9 or app for focus. She's like, the thing you actually do is you help people feel happy. You help people feel self-fulfilled. And in yoga, there's that Sanskrit concept, sukha, which is
Yeah.
like the happiness you feel when you're doing the thing you're meant to do.
Do
You feel good. You're
you
in
feel
your
it?
lane.
You
You're
went in
doing the
state
thing you're
of
good
flow.
at. Exactly. And she's like, I think all the productivity tools you offer people are the path. They're not the goal.
A
The
hundred
path
percent.
leads to that guy saying, because of you at 3 o'clock, I am happy about the work I did and I am playing with my kids. And I was like, we're going to call the company the Sukha Company, the happiness company.
No, you know what I love about that company or what you guys are doing is the reality is that we all are gonna end up working, but
Yeah.
the we like for instance, a computer just helps us to be more productive. It's not that you can't do your work without a computer, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you can't do your work without the Sukra app. It's just
Right.
that
Yeah.
why would you want to if you could be more productive? Because I always see things I love sports analogy, and my favorite sports analogy I use is Formula One, right? In
Is
that
what?
Formula
Oh,
One,
Formula One.
yeah.
Wow.
And
We
the
have a
reason
track here in Austin, right? We have the Circuit of the Americas.
the reason why I love Formula One is because it has this opportunity. You see it when the people come into the pit stops, right?
Mhm.
Which people can move fast, accurate at the
Yeah.
same time. You can have team synergy. You can have synergy when things are kind of explained and everyone is understood what needs to happen, right? But
Yeah.
everyone's super focused. And the time it takes in the 90s for a pit stop was like maybe 10 seconds, right? Doesn't sound like a lot, right? Now it's 2 seconds. Do you know how much time on the track that is? If every time you do a pit stop, that you are now just doing 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds, when a car can go up to 200 miles per hour,
That's
you're
insane.
adding
Yeah.
laps, you're adding tangible laps.
Yeah.
And so what Sucre does is it's that pit stop. It allows you to just move a lot more focused throughout the day.
I
And this
appreciate you saying that.
1% compounding focus over a year,
Yes.
over 2 years, what would a person be in 2, 3 years if they're getting more things done more quickly?
This is so true. Okay. I'm going to see your sports analogy and I'm going to raise you one. You
All right.
ready?
Yeah.
So, a feature that we launched last year was I realized that we had a lot of members
Yeah.
in all over different time zones, stuff like that. And they're all disconnected. But I would talk to a lot of them because, I'm very public in the app. I'm like, if you have a problem, reach out to me. I run the company. If there's
Right.
anything I can do, if I can help you in any way, even, not related to the app, but just in productivity in general, right? So
Right.
people reach out to me. And I had this realization where I was like, you know what? I think the cool part is what if we were to have an opportunity for people in this community to know each other, to support each other,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So we try this thing. And I was talking again to one of our members.
Mm.
And we were talking about this. And I was like, I'm thinking of doing this feature where there's like, it's almost like if you're a writer, there's like this famous, if you're in film, there's this
Yeah.
famous coffee bean that's across the street from the Directors Guild on like Sunset in Fairfax, the northwest corner of Sunset in Fairfax. And it's just somehow became this place a lot of writers go to write. And it's not incredibly social. It's not like everyone's like bopping around table to table. Hey, Ramon, what are you working on?
Right.
But it is something where you walk in there and you see everyone's on their laptops. And in the corner, there's that old guy who's written like 4 studio movies and he wrote The Last Avenger, like that sort of
Yep.
thing. And he's right because this is his habit from when he was 20, right?
Yep.
And then on, the table next to you, there are two guys that just got off the bus that are writing their first screenplay, like
Yeah,
pecking at.
right.
And
Right.
it's a place where it felt like a part of that. So I was pitching this to her, going like, "What do you think? I'd like some feedback." Because remember, I'm trying to listen, right? So I was like,
Yes.
"I had this idea. What do you think?" And she said this to me. She said, "You remind me of Nike." And I was
Mm,
like, "Tell me what you mean." She said, "I can go buy a pair of running shoes, and Nike will sell me a left and right, and here a pair of shoes. I can put them on my feet. I can go run. I'm all good, right?"
right.
But 100 million people belong to the Nike Run Club. Yet every one of their shoes can be used to run alone.
Yes.
So the reason is
Community.
community. You run faster, you're more accountable, you run further. The
Yeah.
days that you need support, that you're like dragging and your friends there is like, come on, we're going to do this. They
100%.
hold you up, and other days you hold them up. And
100%.
she's like, that's powerful. I was like, okay, we're going to build that.
I would like even with sports, like if you talk to a person who used to play a team sport,
Mhm.
and like they'll talk about the glory days of team sport, and it's like, what do you miss the most? Like
Yep.
you miss the community of the guys behind you pumping you up to lift the weight that you don't think you could lift, right? Like,
Yep.
like the coach telling you just push a little harder, you're almost there, right? People
Yeah.
actually holding you accountable. Like you go, CrossFit is a perfect example like this.
Yes.
If you join a CrossFit, it's different. I've done CrossFit. I've been in boxing. I've done jiu-jitsu. Done quite a few
Wow.
different sports, right? And I've been in
Yeah.
different sports avenues. I've gone to weight, like specific gyms for strongmen or powerlifting, right? And so you
Okay.
go to a commercial gym, everyone's like just doing their own thing, right?
Yeah.
You go into a CrossFit gym, the entire gym is doing the workout together.
Yeah.
It's a big difference, right? When like people are cheering you on. If you're the last person and you're throwing up the weight, if you're throwing up a big weight, everyone's around you like cheering you on to take on the weight, right?
Yes.
And so that community part builds this like want to go to those environments much more than if you go from that and you go back to a commercial gym where everyone has their headphones in doing their own thing.
Right.
You're like, what the heck is
What
this?
is this?
Yep.
Ramon, can I tell you, I think I can actually use his name. I haven't used anyone's name so far because
Yes.
I've never asked him if I could share the stories, but I think I can share his name. So when we built this and we launched this, and I called it the coffee shop
Mm,
after the coffee shop in West Hollywood, that coffee bean where everyone, the writers go, right? I was just like,
yep.
I want to be like a coffee shop where it's quiet, but it's like this community. So in there's a guy who is I believe a high school administrator in Missouri,
Right.
right? And he has been working on the side like nights and weekends to get his PhD.
Wow.
And so he comes in, you'll see him in the coffee shop, people can post like what they're working on, how long they worked at it. People can ask them about that. Like a fun little community,
Right.
but it's all like productivity oriented. It's not like people posting photos themselves on vacation. It's just like a productivity chat, right?
Right.
So people have been watching him for a year and a half, 2 years, working on his dissertation, working on his PhD. Monday last week was his. I guess you have to defend your dissertation, or whatever.
Of course. Yep.
So that was his day for his defense. And there are people, I run the platform. I know where they are. I
Yeah.
know they don't know him. There are people around the world from Friday to Monday going, Roy, you got this, man. Good luck on Monday. Roy, I've been watching you for 2 years working away because you can see each
Yeah.
other if you want to. You can turn your camera on and see each other.
You
And
were right.
and on Monday, he came back. He goes, thank you guys. I am now Dr. King. I
Amazing.
can't tell you what this community means to me. The nights and
Amazing.
weekends I've given up to be, here in this platform trying to get my stuff done. He's like, it was hard. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed, but I wanted to log in and just say, thank you guys. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is something I'm proud of. Like we gave people a place where they can hold each other up like a run club and
Yep.
go, come on, man, let's get out of bed this morning. We're gonna run. I know it's raining. I'm gonna do it if you're gonna do it. Okay,
That's
let's
what
do it.
all high performers will tell you, that their team are like the persons who are around them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a fighter, you're running, you're doing a run club. That you don't do it by yourself. Like you have a gym. Like
Yeah.
I've gone to commercial gyms and I've gone to serious like gyms specific to serious tasks, like a boxing gym, right? Like the people
Mhm.
inside there. Even if you're working on your own thing at the time, just seeing someone else working out in the gym that you're working out
Yeah.
inspires you. Like you're like, wow, like I remember when he just started, or man, I can't wait till I get to a point where I could throw the jab like that, right? And so like you're seeing greatness, and being around greatness, that energy just transfers to you. You can feel it the moment you walk
Yeah.
into the room. That
Yeah.
all right, so for even when I went studied engineering, right? But I was in Jamaica before I got to NYU Polytechnic. My
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
stepmom and my dad visited on my behalf, meaning like I was in Jamaica and they went. I wasn't even at the tour of the actual campus. But my stepmom is a dean of discipline. She works in teaching for her whole life. She's been a
Mhm.
assistant principal, etc. Right? She walks into the school. She goes to the civil engineering department, and the first thing they had was a concrete canoe, right? Because they
A
race
concrete canoe?
a canoe made out of concrete. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so that's like a big civil engineering competition. Like you build a canoe out of concrete and you race it every year. And
Oh,
that
so it
was
has to float. You have to figure out how to build a canoe out of concrete, lightweight enough and sturdy enough to. Okay,
absolutely
got it.
because
Okay,
like,
cool.
and so you find it's a geometric problem, it's a mass problem because density for something to float, the
Yeah,
density of what it's floating
the
in, it
displacement of the
has to be
water.
larger than the density of the thing that you want to float, and density is
Yeah,
mass divided by volume, so it's a mass and a volume spread
right. Yeah, it's a
ratio. And
good
once you get,
engineering
yeah,
challenge.
it's a
Yeah,
great engineering task, right? But the thing that she walked away from, which is like, this place is a place of work. Like I can tell just by the way the students are operating and moving that work gets done here. And if you
yeah.
come to this school, you will be trained in a way that is like no other. You will get work done. And so that's why you should
That
come.
is so cool.
Yeah. So, big things in that regard. But I wanted to dive into like before you started Sukra, and like, how do you know it was that thing you wanted to do? Because you could have done at this point
It
any other
evolved.
thing.
No, Ramon, it evolved. If you'd asked me a year
Yeah.
before, will I end up creating something to help people do their best work or be
Yeah.
happier or be healthy? I would have been like, no, I hadn't really thought much about that. No.
Gotcha.
Um, I warned you at the beginning. I said there are a couple turns in my story where it's like something fell in my lap, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh, actually, this is interesting. Like, how do I do my version of this? How do I contribute to this idea in the
No,
world?
it's good.
You know? So
No,
yeah, not
I've
planned.
no, I've had moments like that. So like how I got into data center construction, I was
Yep.
home. I literally was home at COVID, and I've done some work at Citibank at the time in data center construction. Right, it was small renovation, but I'm sitting at home, and I'm like, well, okay, well, construction is now going to evolve from COVID, right?
Yep.
How is it going to evolve, right? Like, what is it going to be in the sense of it's not going to be big commercial interiors because at this point everyone's working at home. Well, that volume of everyone working at home needs to be stored somewhere. Where is it going to be stored?
Yep.
It's going to be stored on the cloud. Well, the cloud is not a cloud, it's a physical location called data centers. I need
Yes.
to get into data center construction. And that's literally how I like.
That's how it happened.
And so when the opportunity came, like I was at, sitting down, my bosses came to me like, hey, they're just, honestly, they were just talking around me. They were talking about the problem around me. I'm sitting there and they're like, yeah, we have this guy out in Minneapolis. We need a second in command to help him and work with him. And I was like, so what? They're like, what are we going to do? And they're like, I don't know, like we need to send someone out there. And I was like, they look over and they look at me and I look at them. I'm like, no way. And they're like, yes way. I was like, hold on. I'm Jamaican. You're going to send a Jamaican
To
to
Minnesota?
Minneapolis, the coldest state, to do what exactly? And they're like, well, it's going to be data center construction. We're going to be building a data center out there. I was like, all right. No, yeah, I'm a curiosity, but it's still Minneapolis. And at the time, the boss was someone I knew very well. He was my rabbi in the company, right?
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so he's like, listen, Ramon, I've never steered you wrong before. Trust me, this is going to be great for your career. And ultimately, I was like, well, I have acts because I'm about to get married, right? It's 6 months from my wedding date. I
Right.
can't go to my wife and just say I'm going to get up in 6 months' time and just go tour across the halfway through the world. What is it that you're going to tangibly provide me, monetary wise and benefits wise? And it's like, well, the cost is covered. If you need your car to get sent over there so you don't have to pay for two car payments while you're
Mhm.
there, no problem. Again, whatever you need, we're going to accommodate because we need someone there who trusts can get the job done.
Yeah,
Right?
we trust you. We need
And
you
we
to go.
trust you as a person to do that. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right. And that was it. I got up and I said, let's go to
Wow.
Minneapolis. Let's go
I
to
can only
Minneapolis.
imagine what that was like.
And so I came home and I'm like, yeah, Abigail, like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to Minneapolis. She's like, okay, what's going on? This is moving real fast. What's the plan? And I was like, by the time we finish this, I'll have had a skill set that is going to be beneficial for the next 10 to 15 years. This is
Right.
before AI. This is even before like the AI boom really kicked in, right? Like I was
Yep.
just thinking about cloud
And now the
computing
data
and
centers are crazy. Yeah.
now it's crazy because of AI, because of NVIDIA, because of the need for computing power. Let's give you an example of what type of computing power we need, right? A typical rack
Yeah.
carries 10 kW, right? That's a
Okay.
typical rack. The rack is maybe 7 foot tall, 3 foot wide, right?
Okay.
And most data centers, a small build out would be 120 racks, right? Which
Okay.
would be end up 120 kWs, right?
Right.
One of these NVIDIA racks is 600 kW,
One rack.
which means just because for AI, which means you could have a room of 120 10 kW racks, and this one rack is going to suck up more power than
Wow.
120 of those racks. That's
Wow.
the
And
type
then it
of,
has to be cooled, right?
yeah, that all has to be cooled. That all, but the power requirement of one of those racks, meaning that one rack just eliminated the need for 120 racks.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
not. So there's the type of computing power you need behind AI needs. There's like a physical, tangible need behind it
Mhm.
because there's a law of conservation of energy. It's not created but transformed from one form to the next. So
Right.
like to compute faster, to compute such a technical problem requires energy. Where is
Yeah.
that energy coming from? It's coming from electrical energy. Well, we
Yeah.
need to drag that energy there. And so as computing becomes more and more complex, the more and more power you need, which is the more and more data centers you need. So but I didn't even know it was going to become this. I
Oh
knew,
my
but I
God.
had an idea, like you said, you kind of, flow your way there, right? And your skill set, your love, your opportunities kind of gravitate things to you. And I don't
Yes,
think that's,
there's a lot of power to, yes, that feeling of attraction.
yes. So my final question for you is,
Ready.
you lightning round, if you were 21 again and you wanted to give direction to somebody yourself at 21, what would be that thing you would say to that person?
Wow. The high level would be learn, just that word. Remember the way
Mhm.
IBM's motto was think?
Yes.
I think what's amazing right now is learn. There
Mm,
is so much information and it's well indexed and it's available. You can learn almost anything.
mm.
And that definitely, like, as I have, a son this year and probably a daughter in 2 years, like,
Congrats.
that will be probably the overriding message I'll give to them, which is like, just learn because it's an amazing period of time to be alive. And yes, it's scary. AI and the robots are going to take over the world. We'll become, their slaves. I get it. I know all the
Yeah,
things, right?
right.
Right. But learn.
Learn. No, well said. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to
It's been
have you
so
on the
much fun. Thank
podcast.
you, Ramon, for
No,
having
I'm
me.
happy you came on. The app itself, I would tell
Mhm.
anyone, get it, use it, because to have a productivity tool in our life and a time of distraction is going to be the difference maker for many people, right? If you were in a corporate setting and you were just a middle manager, it literally could be the difference between staying in middle management and becoming an exec.
That is what
Because
we're
if you
trying to
have a
create.
tool that is going to give you a competitive edge in the sense of being more productive, it may not give you a competitive edge over a year, but like Kobe Bryant says, what happens in 5 years? That compound interest of 5 years of
Yes.
being productively working, it reaches a point where no one can catch you.
You outpace. Yeah.
You
It's so
outpace
true. I
everybody.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
So I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the
Thank you for
podcast.
having me.
Absolutely, brother. And thank
Okay.
you. Keep safe.
Have a good afternoon.